And we're live. This is Michael Finicaro on the AI Across the Product Lifecycle podcast. Freshly back from Dallas and Prove It, which was pretty eye-opening on the IoT MES side of the market. Today we're going to talk about BIM versus BOM. I have Christina Savian with me, who I met through Rob Peroni, and who's someone in the construction industry for many, many years, and one of my regular panelists, of course, Rob Peroni. Why don't Rob, introduce yourself and then give us a one sentence definition of PLM.
Right. Okay. So lovely to be here, and really happy to be here with Christina, because I think what she's doing in that space is really exciting. So it's really cool to be able to chat and find out, where things differ, where things overlap. So my background is bills of material, product data management, and ultimately managing that product data across the life cycle. So for me, the definition of product lifecycle management is how you steward all of your product data through the life cycle, from the inception of the product itself and what that means as for your business, all the way through to the operation of the product in the field, and then retirement. And so it covers not just a PLM system, but it's all of the systems involved in managing that data end to end, plus all of the people involved and all of the workflows, and then obviously the information itself. And not just for an end in itself, but ultimately what that enables your business to do in terms of business performance.
Sounds like you've been drinking the Brian Carroll Kool-Aid a bit. Christina, can you tell us a bit about yourself and then give us a definition of BIM?
Hi everyone. Thank you for having me. So it looks like, Rob, you do not have to introduce myself, but I guess, as you're a regular speaker. So I'm Christina Savian. I'm based in Dubai. Been living in Dubai for the last 3 years. Many called me now these days the queen of digital twins, at least for built assets. Yeah, and I kind of freaked out a little once I discovered that even ChatGPT is recognized me as one of these industry experts. And I've been basically untangling what the definition is digital twin, which is definitely an evolution of BIM, what it means for our construction life cycle. And this is an amazing opportunity, because I've been talking about this concept applied for the asset for the last 8 years. Yeah, I put my first publication like 8 years ago. And it's a concept that comes from the product lifecycle management, right? But it's one of the rare opportunities where I actually have an opportunity to speak to people like you, so we can exchange, insights on the product lifecycle management and what it means to apply this to the built assets and to a very, very, very unique, life cycle, which is construction. So just to give you the definition, to be honest, it's the same for BIM. It's literally just life cycle information management for built, across the life cycle. So it's really kind of like the same. Where it changes, or kind of is the evolution, is now when we talk about, digital twins, because from the prototype cycle management definition, which has been around for 30 years, it's kind of the next step. It's not static, model, but it's the virtual digital replica with a connection between the physical, and the virtual. But when it comes to built assets, which are one-off, which are very, very, very sequential life cycle, with a very ridiculous amount of people working across these, stages in a sequential way, it actually, especially when it comes to live connection, it actually needs to be applied, differently if we actually want to benefit from the concept of the, digital twin wants to bring.
Thank you for that. So how did each of you end up in your respective worlds? And have you ever crossed paths professionally so far?
Well, so I reached out to Christina because I've always, I think probably about 10 years ago, I first saw her, posting one of the conferences that she was at, or I saw her talking about BIM, and it resonated with me. And the idea, the work that I do within the product data management space and the PLM space. And so, I've been following her for a while now. And more recently, kind of took up the courage to reach out and say, "Hey, can we have a chat?" Because I
I don't
think,
mind.
yeah, well, I mean, you're an impressive person, and I just thought that there's probably, I was just curious. I'm curious. I'm a collaborator, and as I was interested in, the overlap between the different kind of spaces. And so my background in how I got into product data management was really, I'm an engineer by study, so I worked as a resident engineer. But I soon saw that actually there's enough people to engineer and fix things from the engineering perspective, but where the bottleneck was actually getting the product data to flow through the systems, etc., to trigger the real world events like changes, and part ordering, etc. So I made it my mission to improve that, and so I took it over, improve the flow, improve the visibility, improve the communication, and ultimately that was how I found myself in this world of product data management and product lifecycle management.
Thanks, Rob. But you, Christina, how did you become the queen of BIM or the queen of construction
Digital
digital
twin?
twins?
No, definitely not a BIM expert. I just happened to work for the software house that made BIM, mainstream. Let's put it that way. But it was actually by accident in December 2018. I was living in London. I was invited to do a evening lecture, live stream recorded at UCL Bartlett. And from who doesn't know, the most important, university for construction. And when I got invited, I was like, what can I possibly teach? Everyone in the room, I feel like everyone knows more than me. And it was at the back. If you have not picked up my accent, I was born in Italy, been living across the world for the last 22 years. But it was just after the Morandi Bridge in north of Italy collapsing. And at the back of that, I simply asked myself, for someone that has been driving digital transformation at that time for civil infrastructure for over a decade, it's like, I cannot let that happen. How did we not see that happening? I was on the bridge on exactly the same day a year earlier. Anyone, I wouldn't know, could have been on this bridge. My family could have been on the bridge. And people died. Is that acceptable? So then is when I kind of discovered this terminology about digital twins. There was absolutely nothing published for built assets. And I did what, was the only thing was available. I called everyone with the gray hair and I said, what do you think this is? I put together my lecture, and it was very basic and very informative. 8 years later, it's still available. And people find me from that. But I think the most important thing is that week was the launch of the Gemini principles in UK, which is a government, initiative and government to embrace, the digital twin concept at national level, for civil infrastructure. So basically, after that, everyone kind of started reaching out and learning more about the topic, and I got caught up, and then publication started, and everyone came to me thinking I was the expert, so I had to become the expert. But it's always been one of those, okay, what this is, and so the definition, the type of work I do is also evolved significantly as the market has matured for the last 8 years. So I kind of end up on this by accident, but still with the 28 years background that now I've built into the industry. So,
Well, since we're eventually going to run the conversation towards AI and how AI is changing everything, like every other conversation, AI, as we know, relies on data, and I think that some of the data is very much similar between discrete manufacturing and construction, and then some of it's a lot different. I know you'd rather we talk about asset digital twins than BIM specifically, but in Rob and I's discrete world, we think in terms of parts, assemblies, revisions, and BOMs. What is the closest equivalent in for digital twins for BIM and construction?
Oh, so
Christina.
you want me to start? Okay, I
Yeah.
thought you wanted that. No, that's okay. Um, hmm. So honestly, guys, I really want to know how you do this product lifecycle management very well, because in construction it doesn't really work very well. We might have a defined process called building information management, which is very, very difficult to apply, but basically with a lot of standards that basically tell you this is what you should do, this is how you should structure your information. But when you have people that works just with their part of the life cycle, just fulfilling the part of the contract and just basically ticking a box, who trusts the data? And once you might want to start pulling all of this data together when it comes to actually managing this asset for hundreds of years, would you ever trust someone who had absolutely no interest in a long term? Probably no. And I think this is the main challenge for us now. Everyone wants to embrace AI. Everyone wants, I used to say everyone used to want this Google, for our building where we just query and we know everything about our asset or our infrastructure. But now we want the AI, we want the ChatGPT of it. How can we trust the data that hallucinated gives us completely different answers? It's I've been working with some of the design engineering firms that they are the first to start producing this data. Everyone is asking, how do we leverage AI? But the cost to trust the data, to validate the data so you can trust, completely kills the benefits that you might get from it. And it's a very, very, very difficult conversation, difficult, use case to solve, different challenges to solve.
Christina, maybe those people listening, certainly from the BOM side, they might not be familiar with BIM and building information management. How would you describe building information management? What is that?
Well, it's what I said. It's literally just lifecycle information management. It's it's the same.
But what kinds of objects you have information about the construction process, the contract,
materials.
Yeah. Okay. So So because of one specific software house, they made this concept, mainstream for everyone. The majority of the people think that BIM is about creating these, 3D fancy models, which collaborative, where everyone really, collaborates and reuses. We all understand. We all create digital information. Of course, we want to build visually before we build physically. We can solve a lot of problems. Massive benefits of these days having available these tools that not only allows you to to design digitally, but build in 3D, 4D, 5D. Honestly, it's endless. The challenge that we have is, and I've been literally come across this scenario every single time. We have the CapEx, stage where we have the design and the build, and then we have OpEx, right? For hundreds and hundreds of years. The people that work across the life cycle don't really talk to each other, and most importantly, the people from the design very rarely talk to the people that manage operation. They get appointed years and years later, right? So it's a massive challenge that we have in managing this very, very useful and very important digital information across the life cycle. So what happens? If the contracts, because one of the biggest point of failure, certainly for us, is the contract. If the contract is written, let's say, taking in consideration what our really digital requirements are, we might get lucky and you, at the handover, So during the design and construction, you actually collect all of this digital information most of the time in 3D models. Yeah, and of course you should also have all the rich information about every single component, and you can go to the little detail of the lighting and the product manufacturing and who produced that and how many times it needs to maintain and everything. Lot of challenges, because how can you handle so much information in one place? Very, 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 very difficult. The digital information handover is a simple PDF. Yeah. So we used to have manuals. Yeah. And how to manage the asset. Now we have PDFs. And that is the best scenario. When the contract is written, it actually says you need to hand over, at a handover, you need to deliver a BIM model. Yeah. It doesn't specify what a BIM model is. It doesn't even specify most of the time what should include and should not include. And most of the time, people cannot even assess what you should include, you shouldn't include. So it's a bit of a ticket box exercise that nobody really trusts. And how many times I went to speak to asset management operation with the building completed and ask, so what do you do about all of those 300 models that actually we know for a fact were maintained during construction? And the answer is, we are not engineers, we are no architects, we're just very good at managing the assets. So we have no idea. We really don't know what to do with that data. It's not in a digestible format that we can actually reuse.
So it sounds like there's a complete disconnect between the
very. I still haven't come across,
Well, so what is the life cycle? You first have the architect that comes up with a concept, then you have civil engineers that build the structure, other engineers that add the MEP for the plumbing and electricity. But then once you have that model, then it just gets past the general contractor and you lose complete connection back to the architect.
If they were doing the project management all of that side, I've seen it. It actually gets mandated and the contractor needs to update the information. So it is done. It is updated in many, many scenarios. I've seen it. There is actually, there is a process to ensure that this information is updated, because as we know, the build is always different from the design for many, many reasons, right? And but where I've always seen it up to now, seen it failing, is during the handover. Also because most of the time we're talking, about information that actually after a handover, they're not really that important. And in many scenarios, and also you need to understand, we need to use this digital information, wherever we call it digital twin, wherever we call it, being modeled, and the only purpose for these digital replicas and it's to manage our assets more efficiently. But it needs to give us a return of investment. We can't just have a lot of digital data it's not useful. So what happens is you actually realize soon enough that there is too much digital data collected. That actually, if we only really care about a very small subset and what really drives after, and it might be more useful, and you might be able to just trust the information. And every single time I run the scenarios of just let's have a look at what digital information is useful after asset management operation for many, many, many scenarios, 3D model is no interest. The 3D geographic information is not the most important data. There is many more other data sets that are much more important, because it's just a fact. So the cost associated with trying to maintain these models perhaps is not justifiable. Perhaps we need to find a better way. Of course, the life cycles and the tools and all these products that are available on the market, they're going to improve. But I don't know what it looks like for, from the PLM perspective. But for us, it's a ridiculous amount of point products where very challenging, to make them to talk to each other, and very challenging to have a seamless data information, handover between between products and systems. And this is the thing, we don't know what is going to be available in hundreds of years. So we also need to build something, that is digestible from future systems.
So it sounds like the construction industry faces a lot of the issues we have in digital threads, Rob, in terms of
No, you tell me which
engineers
one. What problems
and
do you have?
engineers dealing with 3D models and 3D simulations, and manufacturing dealing more with time series databases and so forth, right?
Yeah, I mean, just listening to you describe the situation, Christina, it's making me think about the complexities when you're collaborating across ecosystems where not everyone works for the same company. So the people, the architect firm and the developer might be different from the contractor that executes the work, who's then different to the company that maintains the building. And they probably all have different systems, different processes. You know, the teams are kind of separately managed. So I imagine that's one of the big challenges. You know, when you've got a big aerospace company where the ecosystem is almost contained, where you know the suppliers are forced to work in the same systems as the OEM.
Yes and no, but those suppliers are working for competitive OEMs, and also you have the operators of the airplanes are still connected, because more so than an HTE or other fields. It seems to me that construction sounds like a kind of a configure to an engineer to order in our world, right? Where you build this product, each product is completely different with a serial number, and for change management, you have to monitor those in operation things like airplanes, because they've got a 30-year lifespan and we've got to maintain the data in case something goes wrong. That's what I don't know. What do you think, Rod? Do you think it's sort of similar to engineer to order?
Well, that's where I think the interesting thing, the crossover comes, because I believe if each building is unique. I mean, where I live, for example, there were I don't know, they built 30 houses at the same time, but and maybe of those 30 houses, you maybe had 6 different types of houses, but the house, but you'd have theoretically the houses should be the same, but every single one differs slightly. Not just because the owners have configured the houses and put walls in different places, but even as the development went on, they found that certain things didn't work, and so in the next house they improved it. So even in situations where you're not doing one-off buildings, but you're doing duplication, there's differences. But yeah, I think the interesting part is the crossover when you start to look at things like modular housing, and you want to do configurable developments and products. Then that's where I see a lot of crossover to the BOM and the PLM world. So you've got product in parallel with project and program.
Modular
Christina?
construction is definitely where the crossover of our world is, but I think we are still kind of far away from achieving that. And as we know, we had some amazing efforts, worked with seen what Mace has been doing in the UK. Here we have amazing factories in UAE. They just build as much as possible off site and bring it to site, and of course it tends to be similar. So some amazing examples. I spent over 4 years in Australia, same, but we are still very far away. Or we also need to accept the same building 10 meters down the line, it's a completely different building. Our products are unique. It's not the same as for you, that you can actually replicate the same and improve the product.
So, Christina, if I dropped a PLM architect into a construction company, into a BIM organization, what would they get wrong about the structure and governance in the first 30 days?
So if you drop a PLM consultant
or architect into a BIM organization, into a construction company,
probably,
what would they get wrong?
I don't know, because obviously I don't know what a PLM consultant does, but probably I can tell you the biggest challenges of people that don't come into the industry. Because once you build your knowledge in the construction life cycle and actually how it works, you stick to it, because that's really, it's your asset, right? Your competitive advantage. The biggest challenge that people find when they move to construction is understand this very, very unique sequential, life cycle, which is at the base of our society. We've been with an underlying procurement model that will never really change. And the way how we've been procuring assets It's the same. It's always been the same. And is he efficient? Probably not. But so many attempts, I've been trying to change that. And it's difficult. Why? The contracts, it's also very, very risk adverse, industry. If something is untested, people are going to die, right? People think, how is it possible that construction is the least digitized industry in the society? Try to bring anything in and trying to pass years and years of testing where you can try on one, and then by the time you tested something, you need to move to another construction site, then you move to another construction site, then you need to move to another construction site, and different settings, and sometimes most of the time you cannot even validate it, that is actually safe. So what would they write wrong? Probably the challenges of managing a product. It's always different, each individual time, and always unique.
There's a question in the chat. Maybe this is a good one for Rob.
Yes, go for it. How many people do we have? I cannot even see.
About 13, 14.
Okay, great, amazing.
So Sushil Kumar, who apparently eats, sleeps, and IP repeats, that's his profile, asked, what is the one thing PLM could realistically adopt from BIM in order to improve how it handles complex assemblies?
Well, the thing that I am most interested in about the BIM world and Christina's world is the idea that you have to operate these assets for years. Christina mentioned, whether it's hundreds of years or 30 years, I don't know. I guess it differs by buildings, but that in many of the companies I've worked in, the products tended to be, once they were built and sold to the customer, they were at best serviced, but ultimately the product was out of the ecosystem and no one really cared about it. But these days, with things like mobility and uptime, etc., where you want to keep the products operating, that's standard business in aerospace. I think that's the most interesting part is how do you asset management and keeping a record of all the changes that you're doing to that object over time, and so that you can always go back to it and know.
It's simple. People think actually that these buildings have amazing, sophisticated systems. I live in one of the most iconic tarmac towers in Dubai. The entire asset management system is WhatsApp. It's a fact.
So you're saying that so how does that work then? So is it at any given time the only way they can tell what is in a building is if they go in and look and check?
They do, no, of course. Actually, it is actually been digitized. I regularly get invited to for my maintenance, and that they actually check regularly all the PM system, make sure everything runs smoothly. To obviously they do preventive maintenance, so I actually of course have schedules and everything, but so much more could be done. It's one of the challenges, and I was talking to this the other day, is most of the buildings here in Dubai are branded. Yeah? So I live in a designer like Fendi Tower. It's a few years old. There is there's just no provision for anything that is going to break and needs to be replaced, which means when it breaks, there is no substitute. So soon enough, these towers will look different because you're going to start replacing different parts and you cannot really do, the same. We have one very important tower here next door where the window systems that they used, the company went bankrupt. They keep breaking down. It's absolutely impossible. And the cost, to even use them, some of the flats can no longer go outside to the balcony. And the cost of changing that, it's ridiculous. Could this be avoided? Probably by understanding and maybe keeping this information or understanding, this information from the design and the term vision. But this is also the thing. Probably it look really great, and we do need innovative systems like all the time, right? But something went wrong. And these are the challenges that all the times, we see. They completely change now. They're changing for each floor is 84 floors, and they keep regulating is 7 years on, and they're changing completely their conditioning system, and then have to redo the entire types. 7 years, like, how is that possible that after only a few years we have to replace so many of them? So there is so much they could have done, prevented, earlier, but can understand it's very, 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 very difficult. And most of the time, even if you acquire this information, the people that manage the building just very good at managing the building, because that's what they do when they get the contract, and it's like, we're very good at managing this, and they do the best and use their systems and what they are comfortable and what they trust.
I guess a certain amount of incentivization as well. So it's like the person that designed the building, and then you got the person that built it, and you got the person that services it. They've all got slightly different incentives and business models. And
everyone is fulfilling the contract.
Yeah.
Everyone is doing a very good job of fulfilling the contract. And when you start to understand now construction is, lowest profit margin in history, you start also understand why often they're just trying to tick the box and yes, that their contract fulfilled, and they're like, well, our job is done, we're just going to design the next thing after. And same thing for maintenance. I have a lot of friends that say, oh, great, I want to buy. And now I've been living in Dubai for a few years. It was like, it all depends on the maintenance company. We had a building here going on fire, and, just over the summer. Why? Bad maintenance. Maintenance contract change, quality and safety of the building went down.
So there was another question in the chat from our friend Rob, Mr. Dr. Hilberg, who asked about what do you do about existing infrastructure, Christina? Is there a role for BIM to come into an existing building, like a refit?
Buildings or infrastructure, you mean?
A building?
Civil infrastructure.
Yeah. Does BIM have a role in a 100-year-old building? So, obviously not in Dubai because there's nothing more than 3 years old.
But there is, so most of the time, so it's a slightly different, process, I will say. There is a lot of retrofit use cases, which you go there and you try to capture the digital information. I think one of the most iconic one where they use the most advanced, digital capture and everything is for Notre Dame, in Paris. Right?
I was going to say Notre Dame, yeah.
Exactly. So probably is you have a very, very, very old building, and let's be honest, that the original documents are drawings, right? Even if it was digitized at some point for some use cases, it needs to be recaptured, again. So you immediately understand that, you can capture all this digital information. And most of the time is about trying to find the right balance from capturing all this digital information and the benefits that you can get from digital information. So you don't spend too much creating, analyzing, and building this digital replica that doesn't really provide enough value, for you. And in my case, because I only really mostly work on, digital input assets, every single time this digital twin initiative fail is because they underestimated how much it's going to cost to build, right? And they didn't, they didn't build, a business case efficiently and properly to understand what is the value that we want to guess. If the value is 100, we can only really afford to spend 10 and 20, and immediately detects the type of how you're going to capture, right? The cost of very, very detailed information. It has a completely different cost, right? Then depending on what basically you can afford. And and this is the I think is the overlapping and kind of the interesting part of where the PLM definition, so the digital twin, which the physical and the digital and the live connection between the two, for us are actually being transformed and kind of evolved. And now we only really look at the two concepts, which is the level of fidelity and frequency. So the fidelity is what level of quality that you can afford, that you can justify, yeah? And what is the frequency. And it's not about the IoT sensor, because it's very expensive and really only justified in a few use cases. But it's about, sometimes maybe updating every month it's enough, because that's always justifiable. But so it's a slightly different evolution of this concept of life, or when it comes to build assets.
So makes me just, you kept pointing out that you've got all these manual processes and it's almost all WhatsApp managed. I alluded to this earlier.
No, they do have a bit of systems behind, but what I'm saying is it's
I
a
know.
lot.
So I was going to ask Rob, like, and I think we face, as I alluded to at the beginning, the same problem where you've got these two enormous magnets, PLM on one side, ERP on the other, that both think they own what we call in our industry the BOM. Why do you think we haven't come to some? Well, is that the reason why almost all real EBOM to BOM conversion is still done in Excel? Is because we've done a terrible job making systems that are usable by humans, and they're just so hideous that Excel's easier? Or is it because we really do have two different sources of the truth, and trying to mitigate between them has been difficult?
Well, I mean, first of all, I'd argue against there being PLM in ERP. I think ERP sits within PLM. If you're assuming that PLM is not just a PLM system, but it's the actual discipline of managing product information across the life cycle. So, but yeah, before I talk about the challenges between the different the BOMs, if you like, just 2 points to topics that Christina raised. One of them I found really interesting is the cost of doing PLM. So, like Christina said, there's a cost associated with maintaining the data, and you have to look at the business case for doing it. I found that really interesting, and I think that's the same for many companies, because often companies think about implementing PLM, etc., but actually maybe PDM's enough for them. So I think that's that. I've published a couple of articles about the idea of cost of doing PLM. Obviously, there's a cost for not doing PLM, but I think that's an important factor. And the other thing I was interested in is the feedback loop, and maybe we can talk about that later. The idea that these buildings in operation, does any of that feedback on the failure modes gets put back into the design of buildings? And maybe I can infer that by looking at Christina's face. But anyway, to your point, Michael, I mean information between systems is a challenge, because everyone wants something different from the information. And maybe this links to BIM quite nicely, is that there's almost if you think about all of the product information that flows across the life cycle, we're familiar with 150% BOMs, especially where you've got configurations. But ultimately, if you think about the entirety of the master product data, maybe a portion of that sits within it's like the Venn diagrams. So some of it will be common to everything. Maybe that's the part number. Some of it will be specific to manufacturing, some of it will be specific to engineering, some of it will be specific to purchasing. And so not everyone needs all of the information. And so that's why you have these kind of different BOM views. And I think the challenge comes from everyone needing their own slightly different perspective, and they need the information in their own way. And most of the time in companies, you don't have anyone owning that product data flow architecture. I'm not talking about the IT architecture or the technology architecture, but really which information flows to which group of people in which format, and how do you translate? Because everyone's in their silo and saying, we're engineering, okay, so we're going to throw things over the fence to you, manufacturing, good luck. Manufacturing then like, hey, we need it in a different format, or you haven't given us this information, so we're going to create our own information. And that's because there's not a single owner, that's where you get these kind of failure modes and silos. But anyway,
it's the same for us. And if you think about it, this is also where, well, actually, I don't know if it's the same, do you have all these software vendors that are trying to be capturing all of this data across the life cycle? Say, don't worry, we are going to be the owner of this data.
That sounds familiar.
Hold on, wow, that is risky. They own your own data. So this is also a big challenge, right? So it's we can have, the technology now is advanced enough that allows us to collect all this information, maintain them in system, hand over across different people, have different views. We need the same. The executive doesn't want to know the details. He just wants to know the numbers, right? And how much was maintained, how much was not maintained, and when is the next? Where do I save money? Why am I spending too much? And the person on the ground needs to know if it needs to go on the 3rd floor, on the 5th floor, what needs to be done this week, and where is the point of failure, and the systems, and so on. And at the moment, there is no someone appointed that should look after and ensure that this data, is maintained across the life cycle. Now there are, maybe it's because of a slightly different setting. So here in UAE, we have developers that they own the buildings forever, and they just appoint someone to sign it, to maintain it. So lately, there has been actually a great effort to actually, they say, no, we want to own the data now. We wanted to own it from the beginning, and we want to own it for the foreseeable future. So there are some developers that actually build their own in-house products to collect this information, because obviously the big, builders and developers, they can afford, the cost. Is it used? No, yet, because I think most of the time we forget we're all people, and we're a very imperfect human being, and we're not perfect, right? Which means feedback loop, collecting information, saving, always. It's never perfect, right? And this is a challenge.
So you referred a little bit to the data. I find it interesting that I believe that Revit is the most common format in your world, right? I mean, that's what everybody uses, right? Revit? Isn't that the most common? No?
I actually disagree. Maybe
Okay.
for buildings, but it's okay. Definitely
Well,
not.
that's what I was talking about. So for buildings, it's Revit, right? It's bigger than Autodesk, it's bigger than Bentley. Isn't Revit the right format?
Yeah, but then, we have other softwares now. They are looking, for alternatives, and a lot of other software.
Okay, my point is, what's interesting is that Revit was created by guys that left PTC, which was one of the first CAD products, which actually came out of the mechanical world, that Revit standard. What are the other, and in the PLM world, we have 3 primary players that are both CAD and PLM vendors who produce both the 3D model and the management. So we have Siemens, PTC, and Dassault. In the BIM world, in the construction world, I know you've got Autodesk and Bentley, but also Trimble and Nemetschek.
Yeah.
Are they all equally big, or is one predominant and the other ones are much smaller? In our world, it's Siemens DS at the top.
There is a lot. I also worked with Glodon in China, so I think we also need to understand what part of the world we're looking at.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, maybe in the Western world, definitely we have a lot of people using Autodesk products, ArchiCAD and all these other alternatives have been increasing their market share. There is definitely, I talked just this morning with the biggest distributor here in GCC, and they're actually seeing now a massive request for alternatives, much cheaper alternatives.
So why haven't we seen more consolidation? Because the needs are so different across geographies and across building types.
It's not consolidation. I think is you need to train into the product. So most of the people, they stick and they build entire career with whatever Autodesk or whatever Nemetschek, and you rarely see a switch. You rarely see someone trained in one product switching to another one. We also have the new, students and new coming out in the market. They actually say, why are we using this? There is a much better product that is available, because they don't actually understand the challenges. I don't know if it's the same for PLM. But one of the biggest challenges that we have is because of this life cycle is very long, because there is so many, it's very long term. It's most of the time these alternative products, which are much, much, much better and much more effective and productive. These companies don't have the balance sheet to be procured in big projects because nobody knows if they're going to be around in a few years. Which is also the reason why we are come to this slow innovation, in the construction industry. So I think we also have open BIM standards. So we have IFC format. There is technically you can use any products, and then making sure there is interoperability across the different products, but it's not used, and people are not really using that. For one thing for sure, at least from what I can see, things are going to change, because we can see this new trend where maybe people like us, and I'm nearly 47 years old, so I started I started from the drawing boards. Okay, I still remember my father buying my first drawing board. But we are more, for us, the big brands, the big software houses, they're part of our culture. We go for the biggest and the best and the very established products.
Nobody ever get fired by buying IBM kind of mentality, right?
The younger generation don't. They switch. They don't understand why we go for the big brands. They just have a different mindset, but there is a better product. They are more used to switch between products. So I how many times, and I teach in Hong Kong. I've been teaching in Hong Kong for the last 3 years, technology and the innovation module. I still don't why I qualified to teach, but I've been started as an occasional guest lecture, and actually became now in a formalized course. And it's interesting because I teach master students, so they already went to start working in the market, and then they kind of went back to study. And they are like, why they're teaching us something that actually think that it's so advanced and all new things, and then we go back and we start working and it's like 20 years behind, and they don't understand why nothing is advancing as fast as our world, right? And it's just very challenging. It's the way how the industry has evolved, but it's like anything. I think we reached, for construction, the flat bottom. Honestly, nobody's really making money. In many countries, people don't make money anymore in building things. We already know how tendering for big stadiums or anything, how many companies go for it. Not many. We know that the company building and designing, sorry, building, no, I was building. Our Museum of the Future here went bankrupt. So we know that, the challenges of doing it wrong, right? So we have to do better. Innovation, we need to innovate. We need to reduce, and we need to make it more efficient. But it's a challenging industry. But it's the base of our society, so we have to fix this problem. We all need buildings, we all need safe infrastructure, so we need to do it.
I've got a question. How much of this do you think is, if the majority of building work is manual, how do you think that's going to change when you start to have more machine-built buildings? Do you think that's going to be the big difference?
I don't know. I mean, I think it's like anything. Part will be, there is 3D houses now, right? How many? We just talked about how now modular construction for many standardized, especially for bathrooms and for all of this, key rooms. It's much easier, right? To build, and then you fix them on site and everything. But there is still a lot of manual work. Are we gonna trust just to build robots to just build everything? We're also adding a very different layer of complexity of all the people behind those systems, right?
Yeah.
Rob, do you see a convergence coming between PLM and BIM thinking, especially if you look at industrial facilities and infrastructure and the built environment for manufacturing assets?
I I think so, because Christina said, and that's why I asked the question, because if the building industry is struggling in it and it's not sustainable in the current form, perhaps the way to go forward is to industrialize. When you think about it, really, does everyone need a unique house? Why can't we all have the same
Ah,
kind of house?
okay. Do you really want to live in the same house as everyone else?
Yeah, I don't care what it looks like,
I
really,
don't
as long
know.
as
I
it's
don't think we'll ever
functional, and
change.
you can have. I mean, you can have different variations of it, but I mean, they're only dwellings, really, aren't they? So,
I'll just tell you something. The
yeah,
developers here are building hundreds of houses exactly the same, and
okay,
people hate them. I mean, because literally you go there and it's impossible because they all look the same. But then is when you start seeing immediately, as soon as you move in, the personalization of the house, right? Because everyone wants his own personality into it. And also the taste, the culture are very different. Same house, inside. If it was, someone, local, it's a completely different looking house than, someone coming from the west. So what I'm saying is, I don't know. I don't think we will ever change that. And also, companies compete on the design. I had the honor to work with Buro Apple for 3 years. They design the most iconic facades, in the building facades in the world. They do all these unique things, and there is only just growing demand because everyone wants to build the different thing, the different tower, and there is a lot of competition on building something that is better. So
Well,
I
I know
don't
from
know.
our industry, the trend is, people are trying to get away from engineer to order, and they'd love to do more configuration to order. And yeah, so I just wonder if that's eventually where the construction industry will go. Obviously, unique things like bridges, and where that might be harder to do. But again, even with bridges, I'm guessing you're the expert, but you have spans, and so that maybe they can
They are
be.
just building a massive bridge here in the harbor.
Yeah.
But you also need to understand the bridge gets built here is 10 times faster than everyone else.
Yes.
Why?
Does that?
24 hours construction, cheap labor,
Uh,
and when they need to get stuff done, they get it done. I
but I
live in.
guess
I was born in a country where we've been designing this 3 kilometers. No,
The
it's 30
bridge
kilometers.
between
Yeah,
Messina and Reggio
exactly.
Calabria.
I mean,
I
somebody.
think there's other problems with that bridge that are completely political, but yeah,
It's
it's been a long
political,
one.
right? Exactly.
We only got 7 minutes left.
Corporate.
I wanted to ask one question just on because I've been really passionate about startups the last year or so. In the BIM industry, if I combine all aspects of that and BIM, I have 67 startups that I'm tracking. You were saying, Christina, that the younger people coming in look at the tool set and say, "This is garbage. I don't want to use this." So, do you think that some of these startups like Genesis or Hypar or Airworks or Iconic, do you think that they have a chance to maybe
Oh no,
modernize, or do you think that it's just so fragmented it's going to be an uphill battle either way?
no. It's definitely. I've been helping startups break into the market for years and years now. We desperately need new technology. The challenge that we have is the long-term vision for them is they need to be acquired, to survive long-term.
Okay, by
Um,
Nemetschek or Autodesk?
yes, because they will be then ensuring the long-term existence of the product.
Because
But
buildings last a long time, that kind of logic.
because I'm especially when you start going to Saudi and some of these like massive developments, they don't look at it. They can't afford to go to. They need established products. They've been tested in the market many years, and with very established companies that they can offer 24/7 service level agreement. It's different, right? And there are ways to de-risk these startups. I can tell you there is my list is hundreds and hundreds of that. So you can actually, there are a few places where you can, find them. But it's, what I say, they definitely have an opportunity. They should keep working on it. They are not as, unfortunately, one of the other challenges is often they try to find a way to grow organically rather than raising money, because raising money is expensive, very expensive, and the return of investment for construction, it's challenging. So they can keep doing it. They can keep, sometimes often they start providing services as they build the products and they start establishing into the market. There are ways to de-risk. They're, for making sure they can be acquired, but definitely 100%. The success is dictated on how well they are in capturing their replacement of their product with that workflow, the part of the workflow where they're replacing, and making sure they are capturing the client, the project at the right time. Because when it's project to project, you can't just switch at any time. You have to switch in a particular moment where it's the right moment. Yeah. So
I have one last question for each of you. I'll start with Rob. What's the one thing that we're going to have to change over the next 5 years for in PLM?
Just one thing.
Just pick one.
Yeah, no. For me, the fundamental thing that people have to change in PLM is to be thinking more about the data model, and having that as the thing that is driving all of the work, and then finally, rather than starting with the technology and working backwards, you got to start with the data model and then eventually end up with the technology solution, whether that's graph or federated systems.
And that way you have the AI from the beginning. Okay.
Yeah.
And Christina, what would you change in the construction industry? What's the one thing you would want to change?
I would love to, across the life cycle, there is a ridiculous amount of very passionate people, passionate professionals. They really, really love the industry. But sometimes I think they forget that there is a bigger purpose to what they do. It's not just a job. It's an industry which is the base of our society. And it's struggling. So each one of us can change the industry if we all really go tiny bit more, make an effort, and it's like, actually, I want a better building, safer building. I want safer infrastructure for my kids and for my grandkids. So how about I push the boundaries now so they can have a better future?
Well, that's great. Well, thank you for both of your time. I appreciate it. It was good talking to you both again. And next week, I've got a couple more startups. I think I've got two podcasts next week with startups. And I hope maybe we can come back in a couple of months and revisit the question with
100%.
Christina and Rob.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks, Christina, for educating us.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Okay.